Now, this series is the most, I won't say sneaky fun one for me because Timberwolves and Suns. The Suns have won all 3 matchups this year. That they won the last 2 in April, but Karl Towns didn't play in the early April matchup. The last one, that was where both teams had something on the line. Minnesota was trying to get the number 1 seed. The Suns were trying to get out of play, and the Suns won that. Minnesota's the best defense in the league. And they got the wings. Anthony Edwards can really strap up. Like, I was really surprised when I was talking to coaches and players, when I was asking them about all defense, and I was saying who should definitively be there. Mm-hmm. Assistant coaches were telling me he may not get there this year, but Anthony Edwards really straps it up. He really gets in you. He's like, now, look, you play him off the ball, he may get lost and stuff like that, but in your face, you don't want those problems. Mm-hmm. He's going to be matched up potentially against Devin Booker. How do you see that series just overall playing?
It's a fun one for me, just because you talked about Anthony Davis' defense. The defense that the Suns have put on Anthony Edwards during the regular season series has been interesting to me. And I said so on the pod we did the preview. Like, the Suns haven't made up a fancy new defense that teams haven't tried to replicate. The Suns aren't the first team to put 2 on the ball against Anthony Edwards. They're not the first team to to turn some of his pick and rolls into late switches and show help behind those switches. But they've just done a really good job of making Anthony Edwards uncomfortable. Like, they've kind of forced him to string out some of these pick and rolls and trust his teammates and make accurate, not just the right pass, but to make the right accurate pass on top of that. Mm-hmm. And even when they turn some of his pick and rolls into late switches, a lot of help being shown behind that, so he can't just get to the basket, even if he feels like he can win the matchup in front of him. He still has to worry about a layer of help and then a rim protector behind that. And so part of my optimism, oddly enough, is that I don't think Anthony Edwards is going to be as bad against the Suns as he's been during the regular season series. 14.3 points per game in those 3 games. 0.84 points per possession on any trip that featured an Edwards pick and roll against Phoenix. I simply do not believe he is that. And so that, combined with, you mentioned Edwards' defense, Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert, the improvements we've seen from Naz Reid, I think he's going to be very important, both defensively with those second units, but also just his scoring, especially if Phoenix goes to more switching. Like, he's going to have to win those. Karl-Anthony Towns, as he continues to work his way back, certainly not an elite defender. He has worked on that end. I do wonder what his matchup is actually going to be. Before even getting into how good he's going to be, I wonder who they put him on. Right. Do they give him the Nurkic matchup and you put Rudy on someone else? I'm really curious to see just how they match up in a literal sense there. But I'm intrigued to see how the Wolves work to kind of loosen things up for Anthony Edwards. Is that just going to be higher ball screens for him to give him space to work with? Is it going to be more Mike Conley just to get Anthony Edwards off ball to flow into some stuff? Right, Can they get Nurk at the level and then flow to the other side and let Anthony Edwards attack that way? So how they open and up and just some of the shot making returning, I think it turned the tides there. I do think Minnesota, they have the personnel to defend Phoenix. Phoenix, they can just hit a bunch of tough shots, and they did so during the regular season series. Like, I think I saw a tweet from, I want to say it was Matt Moore, opposed to just how much Phoenix, quote unquote, outperformed their shot quality against Minnesota. And so if you get any dippage there and Anthony Edwards plays closer to his level, like, I do think the Wolves are a better team. I have the Wolves. I think I said Wolves in 7 on the pod. I think the Wolves can win this series, but it's going to be a fascinating one to watch.
My thing is, when the Suns go small and you put KD at small ball 5. Now, granted, I don't want to play KD at small ball 5. I think that's too taxing for him. You know, considering, now, granted, he's been really, really healthy this year, and he's been really, really good defensively, you know, especially playing all those different points of the floor for Frank Vogel in ways that I didn't think was smart to play him there, considering the injuries and the atrophy that he's had. But he's been really committed on that end. Mm-hmm. Who do they use to defend him if they go small? Because they're going to, I'm going to assume they're going to try to play Rudy off the floor. Mm-hmm. How do you see that? How do you see them defending KD if they try to go super small, or I won't say super skinny, because KD is 7 feet tall?
I got you. I think from there it's just going to kind of depend on who the 5th is going to be for Phoenix in that case. Because I imagine big 3, you're going to have Beal on the floor, Book on the floor, KD on the floor. If you go Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal to close things out there, I would imagine, like, if they want to keep Rudy on the floor, it's Rudy on Royce,
right?
And then, like, Cat on Grayson if they just want to continue to have the size on the floor there. And then you kind of piece it out from there. You still have Jaden McDaniels if you want to give KD that matchup. And, You have Ant, you have Mike Conley to close things out. So I think they can do it. It is get funny because Phoenix can just use anyone as a screener. So they could put Minnesota in some uncomfortable positions. But I do think they, in a literal sense, they can match up and feel okay. And ultimately, like if Royce O'Neal hits 3 threes in clutch time and you lose, like you just kind of have to tip your cap in a situation like that.
You live with that. Yeah, you live with that.
But that'd be my best case.
I tend to go with you that it's one of those weird things where Minnesota's franchise history sort of works against them because we've only seen them get out of the first round once. But that has nothing to do with these players now. We just have a hard time saying the words and fixing our mouths to say Minnesota Timberwolves could be going to the Western Conference Finals. Like, we just don't know how that actually plays out. But when you have the roster, the numbers and everything else, they seem to profile like that. I think they win in 6. I don't know if Phoenix gets 3 games.
Okay.
I think it'll be 2 games of incredible shot making from KD and from Beal, like Booker rather, like they did against Denver last year. And then the games where they don't hit incredible shots, the games where you make life just a little bit more difficult for Kevin Durant, where you're forcing him to stand out from 30 feet, take 2 or 3 dribbles, and then go into a pull-up shot, giving the defense chance. To me, that's asking him to do too much. I feel like Phoenix hasn't done a great job of making the game easier for him offensively, but I don't know who on their team would make the game easy for Kevin Durant.
And just to quickly circle back to the small ball lineup point, this is also where, like, we've been kind of, in general, just kind of asking, like, hey, what do the Wolves do with all 3 of these bigs? Do we see, like, there's been the narrative about Rudy being played off the floor. We literally do not have time for me to get into that. I just find that very annoying for what we've seen over the past couple years. We'll leave that alone. But this
it happened one time, and that's become his whole thing, Nekias. You know how that goes. All it takes is one time.
Again, I don't want to hijack your podcast, but I will say please, that's part of
you are here. Hijack the podcast. Go on the tangent. That's what we're here for.
It's so ridiculous. And like, I understand having the concerns in a vacuum. And with this Phoenix matchup in particular, because of the spacers they could put out and because of the shot makers that they have, I understand the concerns about Rudy being played off. But so much of the Rudy being played off the floor thing is because he has not punished mismatches on offense. It hasn't been because he stinks defensively. And even the series or like the Terrence Mann thing that you would highlight on that portion where admittedly he did not play when he was spacing the weak side corner, he didn't navigate that well. But part of that is because he is overhelping because the guys up top are getting beat. So, like, not only is the small ball issue more offense than defense, the circumstances around some of the shaky defense was because of the perimeter guys ahead of him. I don't think you have that same dynamic in Minnesota. And bluntly, we just haven't seen that this year in Minnesota. So I don't know why we're still here with that as firm as it is. Keep it in the back of your mind, sure, because even if it happened once 8 years ago, it happened. So it has the ability to happen again. But like, I just don't, it shouldn't be this widespread. Well, don't trust Rudy. That's it. The context is just different. I don't like, but either way, the circle back, like, I feel like this is the luxury of having Cat, Rudy, and Nas. If you do feel uncomfortable about Rudy, like if you want to do the offense defense thing with Rudy late in games, you can. And just have Nas on the offensive possessions, you bring Rudy back in. Or as Cat is working back, and I teased at the top, like who exactly he's going to be guarding if he's playing 32 minutes a game. If you do feel concerned about the defense, you can just put Nas in there, who isn't an elite defender, but has grown tremendously throughout the year and is a better perimeter defender than Cat is. You trust him more on switches than you do with Cat. The Wolves do have some optionality here. And if all else fails, if you want to go the offense-defense route, you still have Kyle Anderson off the bench. If you want to slide Jaden McDaniels down to the floor, you can bring Nickeil Alexander-Walker in. Like, they have options if you are worried about who's guarding who.
The questions that I've had about the Timberwolves that somebody would ask in the start of a playoff series are questions that you would ask at the start of the season. And I feel like they've answered them. You know what I mean? And they've answered them resoundingly to the point that, look, last game of the regular season, they should have claimed the number 1 seed. They didn't, but that doesn't erase all the work that they've done, all the numbers that supports. Look, that is a generational defensive player having, once again, a generational defensive year. And I don't think we just automatically erase that because the calendar turns. Now, there are some players who I say when the calendar turns, they either go up or they go down. I don't think I put Rudy in that spot. I just think Rudy is very disrespected because Rudy does dumb shit. You know what I mean? And people it's just what it is. Rudy sometimes does dumb shit that brings the attention to himself. But I think as a player, especially defensively, like he's a generational defensive player, Hall of Famer, and like, hey, we can just see that.